Hi, everybody. Alan Arnett here with another podcast on the blog on alanarnett.com. It is, what is today? Wednesday, June 17th, 2026. And I have a special guest with me, John Bartlick. Hey, John, how you doing, man?
Hey, I'm doing all right.
So the reason John is on the podcast is that on June 10th, 2026, this young man stood on the summit of Mount Denali, or McKinley, I guess, in some circles, but I always call it Denali. It'll always be Denali to me. So, how was the summit, John? How were
Man,
the views?
the views were incredible. Funny enough about Summit Day, I kind of remember bits and pieces, and I don't know if that was excitement or if that was the lack of oxygen or,
I think that's called
um,
mountaineering.
yeah. But I remember like on the summit ridge, as I'm cresting the summit, I look over to my right and I see some thunderstorms, and I'm like,
Ooh.
wow, we're like above those. And, they were far off in the distance, but it's like we are above those thunderstorms. And that to me, it just like blew my mind. It was a particularly clear day when we summited, so I estimate you could probably see 600 miles, and I'm not even joking. And it's like one of the only places in the world where I was able to actually like look that far and see just everything. So yeah, the summit at 20,000 feet is spectacular.
People have asked me all my life that I've been climbing is that, why do I climb? And often I used to say all the time, for the views, but it's exactly as you just described. So let's back up a little bit. So John is he's a Summit Coach client. We've been working together for how long? I mean, a year or something? I don't
Oh,
know.
I want to say about a year. Yeah.
Yeah, something like that. And so John reached out to me because he had some pretty big aspirations of mountains that he wants to climb, and we'll get into that because, as always, whenever you get back home from a mountain, the big question is what's next. So, but John lives in Dallas, Texas, or I guess the Dallas area, and he is a pilot for Southwest Airlines. How long have you been a pilot?
I've been flying. It's going on my 12th year of flying professionally. I've been flying since about, I guess, 2019, 2018.
Yeah. One of the things I always like to talk about when you fly into Kathmandu, that you look at most of the airplanes today have maps, and the seat backs. And so you look at that, you see what altitude that you're at. It says like 29,000 feet. And if you sit on the left-hand side of the airplane as you're flying in from like Istanbul or someplace, you'll see Everest off to the left. And you
It's
look at
incredible.
Everest and you go, okay, I'm at 29,000 feet. Everest is at 29,000 feet. So now I am flying where I hope to be standing. But as a pilot, I think it's interesting that you talk about
Mhm.
the views from the summit of Denali because I mean you see these views all the time flying.
Well, I remember the first time I was up really high on a mountain was Pico de Orizaba. I was at 17,000 feet. And I remember standing and looking at the view, and it was weird. Like my mind only registers that when I'm like sitting in an airplane. And it was weird to be like standing there looking at that view. It just kind of messed with me because I don't get to see that unless I'm at work, which I see all the time.
Right.
But I'll tell you, the summit of Denali definitely topped anything I see at work. The Alaska Range is, oh my gosh, it is incredible.
I think there's four places on the planet that are just take your breath away. One is Antarctica. One is trekking by Amanda Blam in Nepal's Khumbu area. The third is trekking up the Baltero Glacier in Pakistan on the way to Broad Peak K2, all those. And then, without a doubt, the Alaskan range. Going to what's called the edge of the world at the 14,000 foot camp, the Ranger camp, the Basin camp has lots of different names. Going over there and seeing Mount Hunter and Foraker, it takes your breath away.
Yeah, I got to go to the edge of the world when we had some downtime. It was kind of cloudy, so it wasn't clear that day. Of course, if it was cloudy, that's why we were still at camp, because we
Yeah.
moved any day the weather was good. But yeah, I got to stand on top of the rock and see the view, and it was crazy. I think the craziest part was when we were at base camp when we first landed, and Mount Hunter's right there, and we're all looking at this big Mount Hunter. And
Yeah.
at this point, you can't see the summit Denali. You can never see the summit until you're really on the summit ridge. And I remember someone was like, "Yeah, that's Mount Hunter," and I mean, it's. I mean, we're staring up at it like, "Oh my gosh, we gotta at least go that high." And someone said, "Yeah, Mount Hunter, you're gonna do about two of those." And I'm like, "Whoa, I got a long road ahead of me."
Yeah.
So
Once
it was
again, the
cool.
scale. The scale is just out of this world.
There's a lot of map bending, yeah. So it was cool being at 14 camp and being like eye level with Mount Hunter and like, all right, we're at least halfway there. And I mean, it's day 9, and we're like, oh, we're halfway there, you know. So
So, what was your? How long were you gone from home? How many days?
I was gone 23 days total, door
23
to
days.
door.
Okay, door to door. Yeah. I see a poster or a National Geographic cover of, and I believe that word is Everest.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's
What,
kind
what
of
what's that doing up there?
well, that's kind of what started my whole mountaineering journey. Is just wanting to go to Everest one day. I was out of shape for most of my life, and that could be my profession and my life choices. And I remember I was kind of like I was laid off from my job. I was working a desk job, and I'm looking on my phone, and I see some dude climbing Everest, and I'm thinking, man, like that would be cool if I could do that, but I could never do that. And then a light bulb went off in my head. I'm like, well, maybe I could do that. And yeah, I started mountaineering, and it's cool seeing the progression, and actually now being able to say, yeah, I'm going to climb Everest. I know how to do it. I know how to get there. I know how to train for it. So yeah, that's my simple reminder of what I'm working towards and what I want to do.
And the photo blown up. That's on Orizaba.
The yeah, the poster that was actually on
Oh,
Itza,
okay.
which was an acclimatization climb we did right before Orizaba.
Is that
So
Orizaba in the background?
that is
Okay.
Popocatépetl.
Okay. Poco.
Yeah.
So yeah, take us through your background. So you're this out of shape desk jockey, and but then you kind of make these decisions about how to get in shape. Kind of walk us through that. That life changing progression that got you to Denali, and also while you're talking about that, help us understand: was Denali a long term goal, or was it an intermediate step as you think about going to Everest?
Well, yeah. So like my story of getting in shape, it's kind of a long story because I didn't really know where to start. I started reading Training for the Uphill Athlete, or I'm sorry, Training for the New Alpinist with Uphill Athlete. And that book kind of like gave me my own path to write my own. Basically, it just got me outside, right? It got me outside
Right.
running, and you got to start somewhere. I know I did a lot of inclined walking when I started because it was easy because I couldn't even run a mile. I mean, the thought
So
of running a mile
incline
just
walking inside a gym,
inside a gym, yeah, on a treadmill, because Texas is really flat. So,
really,
yeah, like,
and hot.
yeah. So, like incline walking got me on the treadmill, and it's a great way to like burn some fat, get active, and it's easy. That's was like the most important part. Um, I couldn't even run, so like working my way into incline walking, you do enough of that and you're like, okay, I finally want to run. And so, I got into running. And then I kind of fell off a little bit because I changed jobs, and um, I finally said I need to just do some coaching. And I actually started at my local gym. I went into the gym and I said, hey, I need to train to walk uphill with a heavy pack for a long time. And I remember the guy who came up to me, he had a no pain, no gain United States Marine Corps shirt on. And I said, oh my gosh. So I did some interval cardio, immediately threw up. And I said, okay, this is not sustainable. I need to look at some professionals. So I kind of did my own thing for Rainier last year. I figured that was like my first, like, I need to dial in. I did the Couts route. And if anyone has ever done the Couts route knows that the Couts has a particularly long and just treacherous and slog of an approach. It's your heavy pack, and on the Couts route, you actually carry up and over, and you just send the DC route. So I knew I had to kind of be in shape for that, and I did my own self training with that, and I did pretty well for the Couts. Self training, using that book, did training for the new
Yeah.
Alpinist. But I had signed up for Denali, and I said, yeah, I need a professional who knows exactly what it takes to climb a mountain. Um, and so I hired Uphill Athlete, their personal coach, and I've been with them for about ten months. And I'll tell you, I never once felt out of shape in Denali at all. Every single task I did, I felt ready. And the training was, it's not like you look at one workout and you're like, that's hard. But if you look at it over the course of the 10 months, that I did with the coaching with Uphill Athlete, you're like, wow, I really put in the consistent time, and consistency was the key. I chatted with him yesterday, and we talked about my consistency, and I was really happy to um, have been so consistent over the last 10 months. And that definitely led to my success on Denali.
So give us
Um,
an idea of what type of exercise and workouts that you did. Give us an example.
Yeah, well, so I have a weird schedule. I'm an airline pilot, so I'm gone, 3, 4 days out of the week sometimes. And I'm in a lot of hotel gyms. And if you've ever been to a hotel gym, you know that, sometimes there's weights, sometimes there's treadmills, sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. So I needed someone who could tailor like a workout plan to my schedule. So I'd say the most common thing I did a lot of treadmill. Like I said, there's no gain here in Texas. I can't go out in the Rockies or climb a 14er on the weekend. It's just, I can't do that. So I spent a lot of time on the treadmill, hours on the treadmill, watching your podcasts. Um, with a weighted pack, 10, 15, 20 pounds. And then towards the end, of course, I was in my mountain boots, doing that tapering and that specific training. Um, but yeah, a lot of time, max incline, 15 degrees, about 3.2 miles an hour, and heart rate zone 2, 3. And I did that for a long time. And then we intermixed some general strength training and a lot of core. I would do like hour and a half core workouts. And some people are like, wow, oh my gosh, you doing sit ups for an hour and a half. But no, it was stuff. It was honestly exercises that I was like, is this really your core? And then the next day I'd be sore in the core. I'm like, okay, yeah, that,
Yeah,
that
that was a
activated a
core.
muscle that I had no idea that I had. So yeah, we sprinkled it in, and then I trained for a triathlon in March. So he was able to incorporate some swimming and biking, which was nice to just mix it up. And then towards the end, the specific training, I pulled a sled outside in the park, and people looked at me like, "What are you doing, man?" And I'm like, "Well, you wouldn't understand." So
So you pulled a
yeah,
sled. You didn't pull a tire. Most people pull tires
I
to
didn't
train
have
for
a tire.
Denali.
I pulled a sled just for the aesthetics.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
I believe you asked me if Denali was an ultimate goal or an intermediate goal, and I,
yeah.
I want to touch on that. Denali was never like. In fact, if you were to ask me a year and a half ago, I would have said, "Oh, I don't want to do Denali. That's too much work. That sounds like a lot of suffering." But I had gotten off Rainier, and a guide friend of mine was just raving about Denali, and I really liked him on Rainier. I did Rainier guided the Couts route, and he had raved about Denali. He said it's such a good time. It's like the best thing. You got to do it. You got to do it, man. I was like, all right. So I think like the next day, to force myself to do it, I just went in and signed up, and I said, all right, I'm doing it next year. And that was a year out. And I just hit the button because I knew that if I didn't do it, then I would never sign up for it. And honestly, I'm glad, like looking back, I'm so glad I did it. I think it is like my life's greatest accomplishment right now, I would say, is summiting that mountain. And I learned so much for, the Himalayas. Um, so yeah, it was never a goal. But now it's a really good intermediate goal for the big mountains in the Himalayas for sure.
I'm gonna start calling you the reluctant climber.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't really have a direct. That's the thing about mountaineering is sometimes you don't have a direction, but over the time you do find a direction, or it finds you, and it's nice.
Yeah, and again, my experience over the 38 expeditions or 36 expeditions has been that the only time I ever had a master plan was when I did the seven summits in one year. And otherwise, I would go on a climb and come back home and say, okay, so how do I do? How do I feel? And then do I still have the burning desire to suffer during the training in order to mitigate the suffering on the mountain? If the answer was yes, then I would plan the next one. And it ended up that every year for whatever it is, 25 years, I was going on a major expedition every year. So I must like suffering, I guess.
Well, they say what mountaineers have a short memory. Is that
Something
what
like
it
that.
is?
Yeah, yeah. Even though my little tagline is memories are everything, but that has to do with Alzheimer's, not mountaineering.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So that was your training. So that was your body. What did you do to get yourself mentally develop your mental toughness? Because Denali tests you in all the mental, the physical, and the emotional. Because you've got sometimes lots of downtime with the weather. You're pulling the sled, which tends to, be your best friend and your worst friend, especially when you're going downhill and it's trying to attack your feet and or attack the person in front of you, or go sideways down a hill, tries to pull you to your death. So how did you get, let's start with the mental toughness. How did you develop mental toughness to be able to handle that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I remember, when we first met, you stressed the mental toughness, and that was kind of the first time I'd really heard about mental toughness, like in mountaineering on serious expeditions. Because
Yeah.
to be honest, I never really thought about it before I met you. Um, I when I had some hard workouts prescribed to me, with my coach, I would when I'm pushing my limit, I would think to myself, well, this is hard, but Denali is going to be harder.
Mhm.
And just doing that over and over again, it was kind of just ingrained with the training. Like, I did a lot of like 6 to 8 hour hikes outside. And, when you're on hour 6 to 8, I evaluated like how I'm like mentally doing. And if I'm really bummed out, I would really dive into like why am I so bummed out? Is it just long? And am I hurting? Am I not fit enough? So I think just like doing it over and over again, really helped me on the mountain, because that's kind of what Denali is. Our leader, he had mentioned you need to have a go forever mentality. That was like the first thing he
Yeah, I
mentioned.
like that.
Anything you're doing, shoveling, walking, you need to be do it forever, and that puts you in a mental state that I think you've never been before. Is the go forever mentality, and I actually found that to help me when I was on the mountain. I know that my mental toughness was going to be like my biggest. It was actually one of my biggest fears going into Denali, because I had never been on a 21-day expedition before. I had never been, without internet, without real food, without real toilets for 21 days. So it was kind of like one of those unknown areas. I always say that you fear the stuff that you don't know, because
Yeah.
you just don't know, public speaking and all kinds of other stuff. The more you know it, the less you're going to be fearing it. So I didn't know anything about that. But I had a pretty good mental attitude going into Denali. And that was because of the training that I did, pushing myself to the limit all the time. And I did really, really, really well, especially with the go forever mentality. I never felt like, I think day one when we landed on the glacier and it was cloudy and I couldn't feel my toes, I kind of was like in a headspace where like maybe if a plane showed up, I might get back on it and go, but that that faded. And you really rely on your teammates too, because at the end of the day, every single person on your team is going through the exact same thing, whether they admit it or not.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
you just kind of delve into the camaraderie of suffering, and the go forever mentality it's a hell of a thing. So,
Yeah, one of my favorite adages is it hard or is it impossible? And I dealt with that question on Everest 3 times. And when I turned around after the third time, I started to say, this is impossible for me. I mean, other people can summit it, but it's impossible for me. I never did or will. But then I did, which proves that, it was just hard, really hard, but it wasn't impossible.
I never told you this, but we were texting on the mountain, you and I had told you I just had the hardest day of my life, which was the move from 14,000 feet to 17,000 foot camp.
Mm,
Because you don't carry a sled, you put everything
right,
you can in your backpack, you send the fixed lines, you do the 16,000 foot ridge, and then you arrive at 17,000 feet, and then
right.
you got to build a tent platform, and then you got to build your tent, and then you have to get some sleep. And so I texted you. I was like, man, I had the hardest day of my life, and I can't remember what you said, but then I texted you the next morning, and we had went for the summit the next morning, and I said, we're going for the summit now. It's 10 in the morning, and we had got in like super late, and your heart rate's 120, and I mean, you're not sleeping. And you told me, what'd you say? You said hard, but not impossible.
Right, right,
And I
exactly.
was thinking that the entire way up to the summit. I was like, well, Alan says it's going to be hard. I can check the box. It's
Yeah.
definitely hard. Impossible. I'm still going, and that's really what it is. You just go forever,
Yes,
and so
keep on going.
I said I'll turn back as if my legs give out, and they of course never did, because I was in one of the best shapes of my life. So
Yeah, yeah. So one of the things that we talked about early on, two things I want to get into. This is kind of the emotional side. So let me just tee this one up, and I'll do the next one. Is the emotional side of that? You were really concerned about altitude because on Pico de Orizaba, you did great. You summited. Rainier, you summited, but still there was this nagging thing. It was again, it was the you don't know what you don't know because you've never been to 20,000 feet, and that was kind of keeping you up at night. I mean, maybe not literally. So tell us, talk about how you processed your concern, not fear, but your concern about being at altitude and how your body would perform.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I'm always scared of the stuff I don't know, and I had never been, that high. I think, and that's where the Pico de Orizaba expedition did come into play. Like, I'm glad I did that before Denali because I could say, yeah, I've been there. Um, well, first off, you helped me a lot. Just talking it over with you, I think that's where, our coaching really came into value there. Because I was able to just ask you just straight up, hey, what if I get stuck at high camp with an
Yeah.
altitude illness and the weather's bad? Like that was my biggest fear, the weather's bad, I can't get evac, I'm having HAPE or HACE. And we talked through it, like all the situations. Okay, you have cerebral edema, someone's going to tell you have it because you're going to be loopy and you're going to descend.
Right.
Pulmonary edema, you're going to be coughing like you've never coughed before. You're going to descend.
Yeah.
Um, so I think that like knowing that there's viable solutions to this stuff and going out and being the fittest I can and doing the best I can, um, I think really helped. And then talking it through with you obviously was like a game changer. So I did not do Diamox. A lot of people on my team did Diamox. People have been climbing mountains for 100 years without Diamox. So I didn't take it and I didn't really need it. I mean, on the summit, it felt high, but it didn't feel like 20,000 feet.
Mm.
And, that the acclimatization schedule is a lot different on Denali than it is Pico. I mean, Pico, I'm here in Texas at 580 feet. I go to Mexico City, that's boom, 7,000 feet. And then we only spent a day in Mexico City, and then boom, we're at 15,000 feet on Itza. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't. My heart rate's 140. I can't sleep, and there's rats crawling all over me in the hut, and and it was just like, yeah. So I felt a lot different on Pico, but I didn't have the acclimatization schedule that I did on Denali, and I knew that going into Denali, the schedule was going to be more gradual. So I think that kind of put my mind at ease, and it was. We spent one, two, three, 4 nights at 7,000 feet, 7,800 feet. And we spent 3 or 2 nights at 11,000. And we spent 4 nights at 14,000. And then we spent 3 nights at 17,000. And by the way, when you come back down, you feel like God because you you have so much oxygen. You're like, wow, I feel superhuman. So knowing that the acclimatization schedule was not going to be as intense as Pico really put my mind at ease as well. And it ended up being fine. So.
We also talked about Cheyne-Stokes breathing.
Yes, you had mentioned that, and that was the first time I'd heard of that. And then we talked about it later on the mountain. You said, "Don't borrow trouble," and I said, "Okay, I'm not even going to think about it." But Cheyne-Stokes breathing, for those unfamiliar, is when you're sleeping and you're at really high altitude, and your body doesn't get enough oxygen, so it wakes itself up, gasping for air. And you're telling me this, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, just another thing I got to worry about." Um, but I didn't have it. My tent mate did wake up gasping for air at 17,000 feet, and he was fine. He knew about it. So, but yeah, it's just one of those things. You told me just keep going, and it's fine. It's normal, as normal as that sounds. It's normal, and yeah, just keep going.
Yeah, it's one of those things that the first time you experience it, it's scary because basically you're suffocating, and our body's smart enough to say, "Hey, I got to do something about this," and so it wakes your system wakes itself up with a gasp of air because you're suffocating. That's the fix to it. But if you know it, and like your tent mate, then you're saying, "Oh yeah, chain stokes, I know," and you just go back to sleep. I had
Yeah.
another client that experienced it, and early that night, his summit night, he went to bed at what, 6. It doesn't matter because the sun never sets on Denali, so you go to bed whenever you want to. But um, he woke up with it, and it scared him to death, and then he couldn't go back to sleep, and he just nailed his summit. I mean, he didn't even try because he was exhausted. It's just crazy. So, so the other thing I want to get into is the nutrition, because you and I talked a lot about nutrition. You hired a nutritionist at Uphill Athlete to help you. So, share with us your journey around nutrition. What are the issues? How did you resolve it, and how did you perform relative to nutrition?
Yeah, huge shout out to Alyssa with Uphill Athlete. I mean, she did phenomenal, and she's so chill because, at the end of the day, she just wants to make sure that you're eating something, even if you're, eating relatively bad. She was just happy I ate some days, but yeah. So airline pilots historically have a really bad diet because a lot of times, if I'm on a 4-day trip, I don't want to eat 4-day-old tacos. I mean, to me, that's just like a mental barrier that I just can't do. I can't eat tacos on day 4 of the trip that I packed, you know. So I do eat a lot of airport food. But the thing is, like, when it comes down to it, and my nutritionist walked me through a lot of this stuff, is eat healthy when you're at home, try to include vegetables, your proteins, just very simple concepts. It's not rocket science, really.
It's what your
And
mom
that's what
told you.
it's what blew my mind. Exactly. Just include a vegetable in your meal, and when you're on the road, instead of the McDonald's, maybe go to the Subway and get a few cucumbers on the sub. And honestly, it starts out with small changes like that. And towards the end of my coaching and to Denali, I'm like going to the grocery store and half my cart is veggies and like good brands and good stuff. And I think that's where the changes really came into play, is because I'm making better choices overall every single time. And again, consistency. That's what coaching is all about, is
Yeah,
consistency.
yeah.
Another thing we talked about is like fueling during workouts. And that was the thing I was not doing because I was not used to doing 3 4 hour 6 hour long workouts. You have to do something during the workout. I mean, that's, you would think that's common sense, but for a guy like me, I didn't know. I
Yeah.
couldn't even run 1 mile when I first started. So we talked a lot about fueling, and we experimented a lot, which was really nice because on the mountain, I'm going to eat the exact same carbs while I'm moving that I do at home because I know how my stomach is going to digest them. So we trialed and errored a lot of stuff, and huge shout out to Cheez-Its. They're really
Jesus.
good. Yeah, they're not bad at all, and they have a lot of carbohydrates in them. So I'd be on the treadmill eating Cheez-Its, and like, people would look at me like, "What are you doing?" But Cheez-Its, they lasted at Denali. Honey Stinger waffles I found were like easy to digest. I will say on Denali, everything freezes, and so do they, and they're really hard to eat when they're frozen. But they were really easily digestible. So we talked a lot about fueling during the workout, after the workout, before the workout, carb loading, and again, that was like another major benefit that I got from the nutritionist. That just like kind of changed my life. So.
Yeah. Electrolyte tablets.
Oh yes, and I'm gonna credit you for those. Uh, that was another thing that I realized that, like, you definitely, that's a must.
Yeah.
Anytime you're doing an intense workout, if you're not getting the electrolytes back in, you're gonna bonk. So I made sure every time on Denali I was moving, I had a Nun tablet, and I would throw that into both of my water bottles. And I trained like that, so I knew how my body was going to react to the Nun tablets because I trained with them, and I like how they just have a subtle flavor to them.
Yeah.
They're not like in your face. Um, and yeah, so thank you for turning me on to electrolyte tablets. That was
Yeah,
that was
that's
a game
something
changer
that
as well.
a lot of people they just underestimate or they forget. I was just speaking with a client just came off of Everest, and we were going through his summit bid and stuff, and he kept saying, I forgot to drink. And
Mhm.
by the end of it, I said, I think I think you were dehydrated. And so that's the biggest mistake a lot of people make, and relative to also to altitude, getting altitude sickness, is that you're dehydrated. And that's the one of the number one causes of getting altitude sickness, is that you just don't have enough water in your body, or you haven't used the electrolyte tablets, so the potassium, the sodium, and other minerals that you lose through sweating. I'm going to use that as a segue to talk about weather. So you kind of had this little um, Linus dust cloud around everywhere except for where your team was. You had bad weather below you, bad weather above you, but where you were was fine. tell us about the temperatures and the snow conditions and what were the mountain weather like? Because Denali's notorious. Last year was a 30% summit rate because of bad weather.
Oh, the last 4 years have
Yeah,
been, or 3 years have been really bad.
yeah,
Yeah, if someone were to ask me, what was the temperature of Denali trip in general, I'm like kind of leaning towards to say hot.
yeah.
And we got so lucky with the weather. Like you had mentioned, it just seemed like everywhere we were at, there was good weather, but um, ahead of us on the upper mountain, it was just getting destroyed. The first the first week we were there, and then the week previous to that. In fact, there was 3 deaths on the mountain
Yeah.
because of that weather. As I understand, a team was descending in a storm and then took a fall on the autobahn, wiped out a team of three. And I
Because
think that
they were not
was
clipped in due to having frostbite. Is that right?
that's what I understand, and I do believe that was because of the weather. You just got caught in a storm up there, and we could see it. When we're at base camp, we look at the upper mountain, and we're like, "Yo, that looks that looks
Yeah,
gnarly." Well, I'm glad we're not up there.
yeah,
And then we would move to Camp One, and then we'd hear the weather at base camp. It's raining, and we're like, "Okay, cool. It's sunny here." I'm outside. I'm drying my underwear out. It's like the best thing ever. And then, we'd go to Cache, great day. And then we'd move, great day. And the only bad day was when we were at Camp 2 at 11,000 feet and went to go retrieve our cache below that we'd cached previous. That was like the only like goggles on, like prepare for battle. And it was a whiteout and there was wind and it was pretty gnarly going down and getting the cache. But like other than that, just seemed like every day we were proposed to move, the weather was good and we'd move up. And I remember I passed Windy Corner. I ended up passing Windy Corner 3 times, and all 3 times, no wind. What a name.
yeah, yeah.
In fact, it
And
was some of the hottest days of my life. And that created different layering challenges, because it's like, okay, we're all looking at each other, and you got one guy that's got a parka on, you got one guy in just his underwear, and you're like, well, what am I going to wear? And you really got to think, and you're asking everybody, and you're like, what am I going to start out this move day in? And a lot of times I'd start off in way too many layers and have to delayer halfway through, and I'd be
yeah,
sweating. We waited out a 3-day storm at 14 camp, 14,000 foot camp, ranger camp, whatever. And but we were already so early. We had summited on day 16 out of my
mm,
19-day trip there, which I understand is
it's pretty
kind of
quick.
early.
Yeah,
Yeah. So and that was waiting 3 days at 14 camp for the weather to clear to have a 2-day window on the upper mountain. But um, did we lose you there?
nope, I'm still here.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah,
And then, so like going up to high camp, good weather. At high camp, good weather. Summit the next day, phenomenal weather. I don't think we saw a cloud in the sky until we got to the summit ridge on summit day. I mean, it was phenomenal. But then we got back to high camp and the upper mountain on summit day was pretty gnarly, but we were already done. So we're like, whatever. Um, and then yeah, the whole walk out from 14 camp was just it was like a constant sunset because the sun doesn't set there, but it
right.
it almost sets. So you have this evening twilight, and you're just walking and you're looking at the Alaska Range. I remember I didn't see a whole cloud the entire trek down to base camp, and it
God,
was just this twilight and Mount Hunters lit up,
yeah, yeah.
and I
The
I was crying. I was very emotional coming down.
the golden hour. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny how mountains will bring out that emotion in you. That part of it, I think, is that you work hard. You set these goals and you train hard, and you're visualizing and you're suffering, and then you accomplish this big objective. And that's the reason I talk about the climber's depression, because you come home and you're like, oh man, what now? But
Oh, it's so real.
I love how you talk about no wind, a windy corner, just like there's no squirrels on Squirrel Hill. But
No squirrels on Squirrel Hill, can confirm. Or at least they were hiding from me when I went up there. But I will say that hill can be squirrely. Oh my gosh.
maybe that's where the name came from.
Oh
Can't
yeah, yeah.
can't imagine there had been a squirrel there. Let's talk about gear. What boots did you use?
So I used the Scarpa 6,000 meter boots, the double boot. A lot of people, and I debated going back and forth with 8,000 meter, 6,000 meter boots, but the general consensus was my feet were going to be hot on the lower glacier with 8,000 meter boots. I do run hot as it is. I mean, if you look at the summit photo of me, I'm not even wearing my puffy.
Hmm.
Well, one, it was a nice day, and two, I ran hot. I did put the puffy on for the descent. It was
Yeah.
kind of chilly in the descent, but let's see. Yeah, so 6,000 meter boots
Crampons?
were fine. Crampons, I used the Gravel G12s. Um, I actually picked up a pair of blue ice crampons on the way out. I'm going to try those out. I'm really excited to use those. But yeah, the Gravel G12 steel crampons, no aluminum.
Did you use trekking poles and ice axe?
I did use trekking poles. I had some Black Diamond Carbon Distance Z's, and I dropped one on the Autobahn, and bye
Bye
bye.
bye.
She
Yeah,
gone.
you're not going
Yeah,
down there.
so it is gone.
For
So
people
I
who don't
gotta
know, the
go.
Autobahn's like a 45-degree slope, and sadly, that's where the three Lithuanians fell. And that's a common area for deaths. That's the reason the Rangers always, the guides tell you to be clipped in at all times. But
There were 59 pickets on the Autobahn.
oh, that's a lot of. You got to get very efficient at moving your carabiner across that protection.
It was fine going up, going down. It lasted forever.
I bet.
But I'm glad they were there. Yeah, ice axe. I used just a straight shaft. I think I used a Petzl Glacier for that, so just a
Yeah.
60 inch.
What brand of your down jacket and stuff?
My down jacket was, I believe it's 900 fill Mountain Equipment, and
Okay.
then I have puffy pants, Mountain Hardware 900 fill. Puffy pants, and then layers like the Arc'teryx Proton, the Patagonia R1, and then any layer touching the skin. I learned from you was the
Merino
merino wool.
wool.
Yeah,
All together now.
the
Merino wool.
yeah. So
I've never
all my
seen
layers
I've
are
never
merino
seen a
wool.
merino sheep shiver. So there you go.
There you go. Yeah.
So did you how many layers did you bring for your base layers?
Oh, let's see. I overlayered, but you gotta bring this stuff. You'd rather have it and not need
Yeah.
it than the vice versa because you can always
Yeah.
cache. Let's see. Merino undershirt, sun hoodie, a Patagonia R1, Arc'teryx Proton, and then I had like a light puffy, some off-brand puffy that I had that I never ended up using. I ended up caching that, and then my heavy puffy. So six total upper layers.
Yeah. Okay.
Three of those base, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, all right. Um, any piece of gear that you wish you would have brought that you didn't, or something you don't need to name the brand, but something that you weren't happy with?
Yeah, my harness.
Mm.
I on most of the climbs I've done, I never worn that many layers, and my harness just did not expand enough to fit, over the layers. And that harness, oh my gosh, I wanted to burn it by the end. In fact, I even told everyone that I said I'm burning this harness. I didn't end up burning it, but I need to get the blue ice harness. It seems like that's what everyone's kind of using. So my Petzl harness was just not designed for that many layers to put over because you put your harness over most of your
Over
layers and
everything, yeah. And you've got
yeah,
another
so
2 or 3 inches of fabric, that you're trying to
yeah.
double in. Then you can't double it back. And that's really the key to the harness. It's got to be double backed.
Yeah, it just was a pain the entire time. I wanted to burn it. Um, the backpack, me and
Yep.
my Blue Ice Stash 90 backpack have a love hate relationship. I'm probably gonna get flamed for that, but I personally thought that there was probably a better backpack, and I don't know the backpack that's better. I don't right now. It carried me through the trip, but it just was like so finicky. The brain part of it just like never fit correctly, and it
The
never
lid,
got
yeah.
high enough, and it was big enough backpack. It was just so finicky, and it didn't carry really heavy loads as well as I thought it would. And could be user error, could not be user error. I don't know, but I wasn't happy with it by the end.
Yeah, I always use the Mountain Hardware 90-liter pack for almost everything on a climb like that where you're carrying those heavy loads. Because you're right. Do you have any idea how much your pack weighed? 60 pounds, 50 pounds?
I want to say at the height on my heaviest day in the pack, and that was maybe 65 to 70 pounds was the heaviest. Yeah. And that was not the day we went up to high camp. That was like kind of early on the glacier when
Okay.
you're loading up with group gear on your sled and then,
Yeah.
stuff in your backpack and all your food. Food's
Yeah.
heavy. That
Typic,
was,
yeah, typically the heaviest day is actually day one when you go from the airstrip to Camp One, but you're going down Heartbreak Hill and then you're onto the glacier where it's pretty flat. So luckily that's not a day you're gaining altitude. But like you say, you've got your sled with your group gear, food, fuel, stoves, tents, and then you got your own personal gear in your backpack. So you can have 120 pounds on that first day, but thankfully you're going downhill. So how was it digging the caches? Did you guys play together as a team well to trade off shoveling and all that kind of stuff?
yeah. I mean, at the higher altitudes, you shovel a few shovels and then you tag out because you're,
Yeah,
at the lower glacier. Um, Yeah, just you're digging a hole in the snow. I would say the tent platforms were a lot of work.
yeah,
That was like, because you want that to be perfectly level, especially at 14 camp,
right,
because you might spend a long time there. So you
right.
spend a lot of time making that camp really nice. So yeah, like making everything perfectly level and excavating the snow and then building the snow walls. It's a lot of work, but you're happy to do it because you're finally at camp, you're done moving, but in a way you
No
kind of
more
want to get it
sled.
done. Yeah, you're done with sledding, you kind of want to just get it done and get in your tent. So I didn't really find anything to be particularly overwhelming. I will say building the tent platform at 17 camp, oh my gosh, that was actually hard. That was like I would move one piece of snow and then tag out, and the next guy would move one piece of snow and then tag out because we were just like, oh, and the boot well in the tent, we only dug like 3 inches, and we're like, all right, we're done.
Good
So
enough, yeah.
yeah,
What? How about the? Now you went with the guide company Alpine Ascents.
American Alpine Institute,
Oh, okay.
the other
The
AAI.
other
Yeah,
AAI. Okay, right.
yeah,
Yeah. I love it how both of them are AAI.
yeah.
But did your guide, I know he was a friend of yours that you really got along well, one of the reasons you went with him. Did he build the elaborate cooking platform or hole at the Ranger camp at the Basin camp, 14,000?
Uh, Honestly, they built the tent, the cook tent, the same way pretty much every time except for 17 camp.
Okay.
It was the outer shell of a um
Pyramid.
Hilberg tent.
Oh, okay. Oh,
No, so it was the Hilberg expedition style tent. It was the outer shell of that went over, and then they built like a half dome of benches, and then you had like a cabinet, or I'm sorry, a countertop, and then the cook area. And it was nice.
yeah. The guides are always in competition to who can build the best, cooking facility, if you will.
Yeah.
How about the snow walls and cutting out blocks to build those? How was that?
Yeah, I mean it's work. We only did that at 14 camp actually.
Okay.
We didn't do it at the lower camps, and we didn't really need it. Like I said, the weather was pretty good, and
Yeah.
we really didn't even need it at 14 camp. Honestly, the wind that did come through wasn't even that bad, or at least I slept through it. It came in overnight the one night, but yeah, you're cutting blocks and you're moving blocks, and it's just like they did in ancient Egypt, I guess.
Oh my gosh. I honestly think that you missed the real Denali experience, where you just got snow blindness and you got gale force winds, frostbite and suffering. I mean, that's
Well,
the real Denali
don't get me
experience.
wrong, Alan. I suffered. I suffered. Maybe not as much as some other people, but I suffered. It wasn't a cakewalk to the top.
So we kind of have gone through the health, training, gear, nutrition, the logistics of how you went and cached and back carried and all of that process, and then the summit night. So you left at 10 o'clock in the morning? What time did you
We
summit?
left it. We ended up leaving at 10
10 in
o'clock,
the
and
morning? 10 in the
and we
morning.
summited it at 7 p.m. And then we got back around midnight.
Okay.
It was a 14-hour day.
That's about right. No, that's still it's just a long day. It's a long day.
The descent was the longest part. We had gotten to Denali Pass, and I remember we're all just sitting there, right?
Yeah,
And
you're
and
just
like
limp.
nobody's saying a word, but we all knew this was the break point. We're about to go down the Autobahn. Every single person is just sitting there, and we're all like, And I remember I had a really bad headache. I kind of made a slight mistake. I had made oatmeal in my thermos or on my Nalgene in the morning because I forgot to bring my eating container up because it's 17 camp. You don't bring stuff like toothbrushes, eating containers. But I decided I need to eat oatmeal, so I made oatmeal that morning. I made it in my Nalgene, and I didn't have an appetite, so I didn't finish it. And what ends up happening when you don't attend to your Nalgene for a few minutes is everything inside freezes. So I'm looking at the bottom and there's frozen oatmeal and there's this water in there. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't get this out. So I knew I needed to fill it before I go because I need water. So I threw as much water as I could in there and I said, okay, we're drinking oatmeal water for the rest of the day.
Ooh.
So that time we're at Denali Pass, when we're all like this, I go to drink some water and I look and there's just oatmeal in there. And I'm like,
Oh
I'm gonna
no.
I'm gonna throw up. I do not. So I'm like, it's so gross. It's so gross. So I choked down as much as I could. Yeah, it was just one of those moments where we all had we were spent. We were so tired.
Oh my gosh. So what was the I'm gonna give a word and tell me what's the first thing that comes into your mind. What was the highlight?
Oh,
You're thinking
if
too
you were
much.
to if you were to ask me while I was on the mountain, I'd say the summit, obviously. But like the thing I really am thinking about that trip was just how good my teammates were.
Hmm.
Some of the finest mountaineers I've ever met in my life. And I think the camaraderie and
Hmm.
just being there in that space what the highlight was. Um,
I love that.
yeah,
When your teammates click and you have that camaraderie, that's what brings you back for more. You know,
yeah.
of course, the mountain and the views, those are all there. But I like that. I like that. Um, if you had a do-over, what would it be?
I wouldn't make oatmeal summit day and morning. I wouldn't eat, I just wouldn't make the oatmeal, man. Because I was pretty dehydrated that day. I only peed like one time the entire summit day.
Yeah,
And
well, that's yeah.
yeah, I was I think I would just wouldn't make oatmeal that morning.
One thing I haven't asked you about is Talkeetna. I love that little town. They had a God, what was his name? They had a cat as the mayor for a
Yeah,
long,
I
long
guess it's a
time.
dog now.
Oh,
I don't remember the name, but it's a dog now because like I guess the cat died
yeah.
and then the guy just appointed one of his other cats as mayor and then the village people were like, you can't do that. We need to have an election. And so they elected a dog. That's the story I heard. I don't know if that's true or not.
I've got a great picture of me sitting with. I know the name of the cat. I've got it on one of my trip reports. But anyway, um, maybe I'll interpose the picture of me sitting with it's something like Mitts, something like this. It was a yellow tabby. It was a really cute cat. Um, so Talkeetna, I kept telling you to go to the West Rib to get a beer and a burger, but
Rip,
it was
rip the West Rib. Yeah, it was, yeah. And I was pushing this on all my teammates. I'm like, Alan says we got to go to the West Rib. We got to go to the West Rib. And so everyone's like, fine, John, shut up about the West Rib. So we all go to the West Rib and it's closed seasonally. So,
it breaks
but
my heart.
it didn't matter. I mean, I just eating a fish sandwich and a burger. Oh my gosh, it didn't matter where it was at. But
Yeah,
I regret not going to West Rib. I'll get them next time.
there you go. There you go. And flying into Alaska and then Anchorage. And then how did you transport between Anchorage and Talkeetna?
Yeah, so I took a direct from DFW and then landed Anchorage, and then we all actually rendezvoused in Anchorage and did our gear checks in Anchorage, and then they arranged a shuttle service that we all took. It was just a van we took from Talkeet or from Anchorage to Talkeetna, and then vice versa.
And you waited till you got to Anchorage to buy your snacks.
I did, yeah, because I'm not gonna bring Fig Newtons with me on the plane when I can buy Fig Newtons there. So yeah, I bought like my fresh food. I try to do fresh food for the first few days of any trip, no matter how long or short. So I bought bagels and meat sticks and cheeses for my first time. But honestly, that stuff will last on Denali for as long as you kind of want it to, because you bury it in the cache and it freezes.
And you
So
said it was down to minus 35 Fahrenheit.
the coldest it got at high camp The night after summit was negative 35. Yes.
Whoa, that's cold. You're lucky
Yeah,
there's
but
no wind.
you don't know the difference. Yeah. Especially when you're that tired. I mean, it could have been negative 135. We were just all tired and sleeping, and everything's frozen anyway. It's not going to freeze harder.
Yeah,
It might freeze a little faster, but you're sleeping. So
cold is cold is cold. Oh.
yeah,
So how are you processing the experience? And you said you lost a little weight.
I lost 9.5 pounds. Yeah, on the trip. A lot of that I found was muscle, which is a little bit disappointing, but
Yep.
is normal. Like my legs, I miss my legs, but they're kind of like kind of tiny. Um, yeah, it was very overwhelming coming back. I was so tired, being sleep deprived towards the last end of the trip, because we hiked out through the night to
Yeah.
base camp. So I didn't sleep that night, and then we were out partying, so I didn't sleep the next night. But like I knew it would hit me when I got home. It didn't really like hit me when I was there or directly after. But when I got home, like 2 days ago or three, I got home maybe 3.5, 4 days ago. It hit me on day two of being home. I'm like, we went out to a nice dinner, and man, I almost started breaking down at dinner because it should all hit me at once. It was very overwhelming, especially when you go through that with such great people, and now you're home, and yeah, it's overwhelming for sure. But it's now kind of hitting me like, yeah, I went out and did something really really great
Yeah.
and hard and respected, and it feels really good now.
Cool. So next is Africa.
I'm planning a Kilimanjaro trip in September. It's not going to be as hard, but it's going to be double the fun probably. And that's kind of like my chill trip. And then I plan to be in the Himalayas next year, May. So nothing's in stone yet. And I just got back, but yeah, I plan on being in the Himalayas definitely next year. So I'm really looking forward to that.
And what does the license plate say on your car, your vehicle?
It says Everest because I am a nerd. So,
I'm shocked that you're even able to get that. But how did you
well,
spell
it's
it?
Everest.
Okay, all right, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, well, it's the great mountaineering state of Texas, where everyone's a mountaineer out here. So
Of course.
I had to
Yeah,
fight for that plate really hard.
it's like growing up in Memphis where everybody's a mountaineer. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got another client in California and he's got Everest on his list as well. And I couldn't believe he got this in California, but it's the number two. And then I think it's however many letters, the EVRST had to leave an E out or something in order to get it. So I love the people,
Wow.
how you guys getting your license plate saying Everest.
Yeah.
Yeah, but didn't you, we're going to wrap up with this. Didn't you tell me though, when we first talked, we talked about the long-term goal, the big dream, and that was Everest. And, then what's the continuum to get there, to get the experience and the skills and the fitness and all that. Um, but then you told me that once you got that license plate, your attitude kind of changed a little bit about going to Everest. Do you remember telling me that?
I don't.
Yeah, you said that you were committed, but you were kind of committed like the chicken is to breakfast. And but then once you got the license plate and people started saying, John, you going to Everest? Look at your license plate. All of a sudden you became committed like the pig is to breakfast. So
Yeah. Okay.
kind of
I
sank in
do
a little
remember
bit.
now. That's the thing, when everyone's telling you about it, and you can't just back out. It's like signing up for a Denali trip, after being told about it. You just once you're signed up,
Yeah.
you're committed, man. And I need that. And I do really want to go to Everest. So
Yeah.
don't get me wrong. It's not like
Oh,
I'm on
you,
the fence. I'm going.
oh, I know. You will, and you'll summit.
So yeah, it's kind of holding yourself accountable, I guess.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I'm also just a huge nerd. So
Well, I think that's a good quality in an airline pilot.
yeah, right.
Oh, all right. Any parting words for us? Any advice?
No.
Any advice for
Um,
anybody looking to go climb Denali?
well,
Anything you
I
would?
I just I want to say thank you for your support and help over this last year. Really, truly could not have done it without you. All your
I appreciate
tips
that.
and everything. I think you provide an excellent service. Um, yeah, if you wanna climb Denali, I'd say start training now because it's gonna be hard. And don't underestimate the mountain. Don't underestimate any single part of that mountain, because it is going to surprise you in every single way it absolutely can. So just you got to be open minded. You have to have a good attitude, and you have to prepare. And I think if you do all three of those, you can summit anything you want. So
I love it. Great advice. Congratulations again, Ben. I'm proud of you.
all right, thank you so much.
The podcast on AlanArnett.com is sponsored by Summit Coach, helping aspiring climbers worldwide to reach their dreams.